What if there was a way you could calm your nervous system without getting sedated, without feeling flat, and without risking addiction? That's the big claim behind a peptide called Slink. Now, depending on which corner of the internet you're in, Selank is either the holy grail of non-sedating anxiety support, or it's just some glorified saline in a fancy bottle. People call it everything from the calm peptide to placebo with good marketing. So what's the truth? So let's unpack it. Because Selank is one of those peptides that sits right at the edge of mainstream medicine and experimental biohacking. It's not FDA approved, it's not widely studied in the West, and yet a growing number of people, from overstressed executives to sleep-deprived parents to people getting off benzos, are quietly using it to bring their nervous system back to center. So first things first, what is Selank? Technically, Selank is a synthetic peptide, a short chain of amino acids. It's derived from a natural immunomodulatory molecule called tufsin. Tufsin plays a role in immune defense, but researchers in Russia noticed something interesting. What's fascinating is that tufsin itself isn't new. It was first discovered back in the 1960s as part of the body's natural immune regulation system. Researchers at the Institute of Molecular Genetics in Russia started asking, if tufsin helps modulate immunity, could it also help stabilize the nervous system? That's where Selank began. It wasn't designed to be a nootropic or a performance tool. It was originally developed as a stress resilience compound, something for cosmonauts, soldiers, and high-stakes professionals who needed to stay sharp under pressure. In that sense, it has more in common with adaptogens than pharmaceuticals. The goal wasn't sedation, it was stability. Beyond immunity, tufsin seems to have effects on stress resilience, emotional balance, even focus and learning. So they modified it. They extended the sequence, stabilized the molecule, and enhanced its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. And they ended up with Selank. In Russia, Selank is an approved pharmaceutical drug. It's prescribed for anxiety disorders, mental fatigue, even post-traumatic stress. It's been around for decades over there, but in the US and most of Europe, it's still unregulated. You'll find it labeled as a research chemical, not for human consumption, sold through gray market peptide sites or compounding pharmacies if your provider is progressive enough. Now, what does it actually do? Mechanistically, Selank interacts with several key systems in the brain, and what makes it interesting from a clinical standpoint is that it doesn't appear to override the system. Unlike benzos, which flood GABA-A receptors and blunt your nervous system like a hammer, Selank works more like a neuromodulator. It gently enhances the system's ability to regulate itself. That's the difference between something that calms you down versus something that helps you learn to calm yourself down. One is suppression, the other is adaptation. Now, that also means the effects are subtler, but for some people, that's exactly the point. It's not a blunt tool. It doesn't just whack at one neurotransmitter. It works more like a dimmer switch across multiple pathways. The big three: GABA, serotonin, and BDNF. Let's start with GABA, your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. Think of GABA as your neural brake pedal. It slows things down, it helps you relax, reduces anxiety. Most anxiety meds like benzodiazepines act directly on GABA receptors, and they do it fast, but they also tend to sedate you, impair memory, and build tolerance. Selank's interaction with GABA is indirect, but it still seems to support that calming tone. People report feeling more centered, less emotionally reactive, but without the sleepiness or brain fog that often come with traditional anxiolytics. Now, serotonin. Selank appears to increase serotonin levels in the brain, at least in animal studies. That may explain some of the mood-elevating effects users describe. There's also speculation, though not yet conclusive, that Selank may affect dopaminergic tone, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. That could explain why some users report improved executive function, better focus, less procrastination, and easier task initiation. And again, this isn't Adderall. There's no spike. But if your stress response normally shuts down your cognitive flexibility, Selank may help preserve access to your prefrontal cortex even under pressure. And not in a manic, artificial way, more like the mental noise turns down. You can actually think straight again. Then there's BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of it like fertilizer for your neurons. It supports learning, memory, adaptation. There's evidence Slink upregulates BDNF, especially in the hippocampus, which could explain why some people say their memory feels sharper or they're more verbally fluent while using it. And beyond neurotransmitters, Slink also has some interesting immunomodulatory properties. It seems to reduce pro-inflammatory cytokines, particularly IL-6 and TNF-alpha, which are often elevated in chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. That connection between inflammation and mental health is getting more and more attention. Slink may offer a dual benefit, calming the mind while also reducing neuroinflammatory load. So that's the theory, but what about actual research? Most of the studies we have come out of Russia. That's important to know up front. Different regulatory standards, smaller sample sizes, less transparency around trial design. But what's been published so far, surprisingly solid. One double-blind placebo-controlled study found that Slink reduced anxiety symptoms in patients with generalized anxiety disorder, without causing sedation, without impairing cognition, and with no signs of dependence. That alone puts it ahead of most pharmaceutical options. And other studies, mostly preclinical, suggest benefits in memory formation, attention, and even stress resilience under pressure. One rat study found that Slink prevented memory deficits caused by chronic stress. Another showed it protected against anxiety-like behavior following immune activation, basically stimulating the inflammatory stress response in depression. Now, is that enough to make it a standard clinical tool? No. We need more trials, especially in English-speaking countries, especially head-to-head comparisons with medications like SSRIs or benzodiazepines. But here's what we do have: consistent anecdotal reports. Go into any serious peptide form or functional medicine circle and you'll find the same patterns. People use Slink when they're dealing with low-grade anxiety that doesn't warrant a prescription, chronic stress or nervous system deregulation, performance anxiety before big meetings or travel, and cognitive fatigue or burnout. And in many cases, they're getting results, sometimes subtle, sometimes significant. Now, how do people actually use it? One common use case, performance anxiety. People use Slink before public speaking, before difficult conversations, even before podcast interviews. The goal isn't to numb emotion, it's to take the edge off just enough that you stay present. Another common scenario is transitioning off benzodiazepines or alcohol. Obviously, this should never be done without supervision, but some practitioners use Slink as a bridge compound, something to support the GABA system during withdrawal without replacing one dependency with another. And then there's the entrepreneur knowledge worker crowd. People who are already supplementing with things like magnesium, L-theanine, ashwagandha, but want a sharper tool for nervous system support that doesn't blunt drive or output. The most common delivery method is nasal spray. Why? Because it bypasses the digestive system and delivers the compound directly to the central nervous system through the olfactory pathway. You're essentially delivering it closer to the action. Typical doses range from 250 to 500 micrograms per spray. Some people use it once in the morning, others use it 2 to 3 times a day, depending on what they're trying to manage. There's also a subcutaneous injection version, more common in research or clinical settings. It may have a longer half-life and potentially better absorption, but it's less convenient for most people. And how fast does it work? Some users report feeling calmer within 20 to 30 minutes. Others need several days of consistent use before they notice anything. And if you didn't feel anything at all, and this is important, Slink isn't dramatic. It's not going to hit you like a Xanax or a beta blocker. Think of it more like a nervous system buffer, a way to recalibrate, not sedate. Side effects, they're minimal. The most common ones are nasal irritation and an occasional headache. Rarely, some people feel slightly drowsy, but that's usually dose-dependent or related to stacking with other calming agents. There's no known withdrawal, no dependency, and compared to SSRIs, it's a totally different mechanism. SSRIs often takes weeks to work, come with side effects like sexual dysfunction, emotional blunting, and weight gain, and you can't really microdose or pulse them. Selank, on the other hand, is short-acting, flexible, and for most people, it's very well tolerated. You can use it acutely, just for a few high-stress days, or in a light daily rhythm and still cycle off cleanly. No reports of tolerance buildup even with prolonged use. But, and this is key, we don't have 10-year safety data. So if you're planning to use Slink daily for months or years, this is a gray area. Proceed thoughtfully, cycle off, reassess. Don't assume more is better just because it feels safe in the short term. So who is Slink actually for? In my opinion, it's best for people who already have their foundations in place. You're sleeping reasonably well, you're training, you're not living on caffeine and sugar. You've got some stress regulation habits in place, breath work, walking, sunlight, whatever your version of nervous system hygiene is. If all of that is solid and you're still feeling a little frayed, Slink might help smooth the edges. It won't make up for a broken routine, but it might support a good one. And who is it not for? If you're looking for a dramatic effect, like a light switch moment, you're probably going to be disappointed. It's not meant to sedate or stimulate. It's meant to balance, and balance can feel subtle, boring even. But sometimes boring is exactly what your nervous system needs. It's also not ideal if you're on multiple psychoactive medications and haven't consulted with a practitioner who understands peptide pharmacology. Slink affects serotonin and GABA indirectly, and stacking it blindly with SSRIs, benzos, or stimulants is just asking for unpredictable outcomes. Now, what about stacking it? So Slink is often paired with Cmax, its more stimulating cousin. While Slink calms and smooths things out, Cmax sharpens focus and may even increase BDNF more aggressively. Some people use Slink in the evening, Cmax in the morning, others alternate days. You also see people combine Slink with L-theanine, magnesium threonate, or low-dose ashwagandha. to build a kind of custom anxiety or cognitive support stack. But again, the more you stack, the harder it is to attribute effects. So if you're new to this, start with one variable, give it a week, track, and adjust. Now, let's land the plane. So Selank is not a silver bullet, but it is a legitimate tool, especially if you're someone who wants to feel more calm, clearer, and more resilient without numbing yourself or impairing performance. It's best for people who are already doing most things right, but need that extra 5% to bring their nervous system into alignment. It's not approved, it's not fully studied, but it's one of the few experimental compounds that, in my opinion, is worth keeping an eye on, and for some, worth trying. Just respect the dose, source it wisely, cycle off, and don't use it to bypass the hard work of getting your lifestyle in check. If you've already done that work and you're still running hot, this might be the gentle push that helps you find that balance again. Oh, and one more thing. If you're sourcing Slink, make sure you're getting it from a reputable compounding pharmacy or research supplier that uses third-party purity testing. There's a lot of low-grade products out there, and since it's not regulated, you've got to do your homework. If it's suspiciously cheap, has no certificate of analysis, or comes in a mystery bottle with a cartoon logo, pass. This is your brain we're talking about. And next up, we're going to look at Cmax, the same peptide family, but a completely different effect profile. If you found this information helpful, go ahead and like and subscribe or leave a comment. And as always, I thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Thank you.